Hi, I'm Donna Vio from The Masquerade, and today I'm going to work on what I like to call sailboat blocks. They have a big triangle on the bottom, split triangle on the top, and this is how you do it. These are the colors I'm going to use for my mystery quilt. And first thing we're going to do is separate out the color from the black, white, and gray. And we're going to cut our strips. I have my fabrics stacked, and I'm just cutting a 6.5 inch strip of each, and that is what we need for the bigger HSTs. And now I'm going to subcut them to 6.5 inch blocks. So I'm going to take my 1/2 inch mark on a smaller ruler here and my 6 inch ruler to get my 6.5 inch block. You'll also need one of each of the grays for 5 7/8 inch strips to subcut into 5 7/8 inch squares. So now I have 12 5 7/8 inch blocks, and I have 12 6.5 inch squares. So let's get started. And I'm going to start off by making giant half square triangles. So I'm going to pair off the 2 lighter ones and the 2 darker ones. I'll work with the lighter ones so you can see better what I'm doing. So I'm going to place them right sides together, and I'm going to make a half square triangle out of this. Now you guys have probably done it a million different ways. You can take a ruler and draw a line from point to point, and then use your 1/4 inch foot and sew a 1/4 inch on one side and a 1/4 inch on the other side. There's also this great little tool called the Quilter's Magic Wand, and you can place the center line on this little tiny ruler right from point to point, and then you can use your marking device. You can use chalk, you can use a pencil, you can use water-soluble ink or air-soluble ink. Either way, I'm going to use the air, and then you just mark on each side of the ruler, and that becomes your stitching line. So you don't have to worry about a 1/4 inch foot. You don't have to worry about lining up with the center line. When you're using a 1/4 inch foot, you just sew right on the line. Very easy. So mark all your 6.5 inch squares except for the last set. Leave the last set, put it aside. We're going to mark it a different way. Mark all these and sew them, and we'll get ready to go with the rest of the block. I'm just going to cut right between the lines. You can use a ruler from point to point if you would like. I just find it's quicker to eyeball it. And they all need to be pressed open, and the dog ears need to be cut. Remember, the last set of these 6.5 inch squares we left unmarked and unsewn for the last step. So now I'm going to trim off the dog ears, these little points that stick off. But I'm going to do it with a 6 inch square ruler. And I'm going to do it by placing my diagonal line along the seam line, and then I'm going to make sure that my other edges go a little bit past the 5 7/8 inch mark. Now I'll trim off 2 sides. Then I'm going to do the other 2 sides. Now that I've done the first trim, I can line up my 5 7/8 inch mark with the sides I just trimmed on these 2 sides. And the diagonal should be right on the seam line. And it seems like you're not taking off much at all, but that really makes a difference in the end. So now square up all your ones that you've sewn, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now that you've got them all trimmed to 5 7/8 inches, you can set these aside, and we'll get started with the next part. Now, going forward onto the next step, the giant half square triangles we made that were light colored end up getting paired with the dark color 5 7/8 inch squares, and the dark ones get paired with the light 5 7/8 inch squares. So what we're going to do is take one of our giant light half square triangles, and we're going to pair it with a dark square. This time we're going to sew like we're making a half square triangle across the seam that we already have. So I'm going to mark it with my Quilter's Magic Wand. And I'm going to sew both of these lines that I'm drawing, and then I'll cut the block apart. So I've sewn it. And now, when you open it up, there's the first sailboat block. And the second sailboat block. And you'll notice that these blocks are directional because the darker gray and the lighter gray sails are swapped. So now you have one of each. So when you pair up the next one, you'll have one of each again. And I want you to do just that. Do two of each kind. So I'll sew these ones. I'm going to put this dark gray aside. And then I'll sew these ones. Two of them. I have to mark them first. And I'll put this gray aside. And then I'll do two of this kind. And I'll put this gray aside. And I'll do two of the darks paired with white. And I'll put this one aside. So I've got them all done. And now I'm going to organize them like they are in the clue. And the first one in the clue looks like this. And then there's its opposite. And we should have two of each. And the second one in the clue looks like this. And here's its opposite. And we should have two of each. And then the third one in the clue looks like this. And here's its opposite. Again, two of each. And then there's the fourth one. And the opposite. And two of each. But you'll notice in the clue that you're going to need to have four of these. And you're also going to need to have four of these. But you only need two of those, so those are all set. And you only need two of those, so those are all set. When you're looking at the last ones in the sets, you only need two of these, so that's all set. But you're going to need four of these. You're also going to need four of these, but only two of these. So this is all set. So now we're down to these ones. So after I've sorted them, I end up with these four that need to be repeated. I need two more of each one. And in order to do that, what I have left are 6.5 inch blocks, one of each, and 5 7/8 inch blocks, one of each. I'm going to take my 6.5 inch blocks and I'm going to draw on the back side of them an X. I'm taking my two darker ones, just like I had here and here, and I am pairing them together. And what I want to do is draw a line down the middle, not with the quilter's magic wand, but just down the middle. And I want to use my quilter's magic wand and go down the middle the other way, across it. Or I could draw another middle line and then just sew on both sides with my 1/4 inch foot. So I'm going to sew this seam. Then I'm going to cut across this way, and then I'll cut each of these sets apart. So I've just done the sewing, and now I'm going to just cut these apart. When I open them up, I'm going to see that I have one set that matches this, and one that matches this. And again, there's that one, and then there's that one. So now all I need to do is pair it up with a white and with a light gray 5 7/8 inch square. So if I put these two on here, I have to check before I sew on each side of this line to make sure that I'm going to end up with what I need to end up with. And there's one, and there's the other, and they're going to be identical. And I can tell they're going to be identical because you can see that they're done like a checkerboard. One of these and those, and these and those. So now I'm just going to sew on each side of this diagonal line and then cut them apart. I just ironed the seam towards the darker side, and I put a pin on each side of the diagonal line that I'm sewing just to hold it in place. So I just sewed that. Now I'm going to trim it right up the middle between the two stitching lines, and I should end up with 2 of what I needed. So now that one just needs to be pressed and trimmed. Those are all set. So to make 2 identical blocks, when you're placing them down on the background, you need to make sure that they alternate. And then when you sew down your middle line and you cut them apart, your blocks will be identical to each other instead of opposite. So I can do the same thing with this light gray. I'm going to take one this way and this way. And you can see they're opposites. This one that, this one that. I'm going to press these towards the dark side, and I'll sew on each side and I'll cut them apart. And I'll do the same thing with the other 2 sets. Now I sewed a scant 1/4 inch seam so that now I can trim them up nice to match the other ones. So I'm going to press them and trim them, and those are our sailboat blocks.